Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Future of UX. My name is Patricia Reiners. I'm your host and innovation UX and AI design leader from Zurich, Switzerland. Today, I'm joined by an incredible guest, by Amy Heymans. Amy has been working at the intersection of design, strategy, and future thinking for over 25 years, helping businesses create better experiences while making a real impact. And in this episode, we will dive into some really important questions like how can we balance business success with ethical design? What does it take to think strategically as a designer? And how will AI and automation change the future of UX? And if you ever thought about starting your own design business, Amy has some amazing insights to share. So I really love this conversation and I think you will too. So I would say, let's dive right in. Welcome, Amy, to the Future of UX. I'm so excited to have you. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to talk about lots of different topics with you, like strategy, ethical challenges. But before we are diving into all of that, please do a quick intro, tell the listeners who you are and what you're doing.
Awesome. So I'm Amy Heymans. I've been working at the intersection of design, experience, innovation, and futures thinking for the past 25 years. I have a passion to use the transformative power of design to help people to craft a bold vision for the future and then figure out how to get there. So I believe in co-creation, interdisciplinary teams, starting with the end. And I've put this passion into practice specifically in health to improve health outcomes and health experiences, in finance to improve financial well-being, and in government to help serve people better. So it's a very exciting moment, of course, now with everything going on in the US government and with AI. And, as I've evolved in my career, I've been an entrepreneur focused on healthy organizations and growth. And so right now, I'm bringing all of this experience to business to help businesses figure out how do we create a virtuous circle between what the business is aiming to achieve and what people want most in their lives so that we get both business outcomes and positive human outcomes. So a sort of virtuous circle that lifts all, as opposed to sort of the broken systems that can lead to the downward spiral, if you will.
I think super inspiring and very, very important of thinking about like the business and the user perspective. How does that work usually? When you're working with a client, like whatever industry it is, how do you balance success between like the user experience, the user, the human, but also the business?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we know as user experience designers, in the course of any project, we want to make sure the voice of the people we're designing for is heard, is a part of the process, right? And that's at the beginning to understand mental models and contexts and behavioral archetypes. And then it's, the feedback loop where we're testing concepts to make sure they're landing correctly. Of course, we're balancing what people say and then the neuroscience and the motivational psychology, right? Because people are really complicated. So we need to like optimize for that. But we can also do more open-ended research around what do people want most in their lives. So I view it like layering. There's sort of the transactional elements of how somebody works with an organization, how they interact with an organization. If I have a banking relationship, I want to be able to check my balance and transfer money. But then there's also my financial journey. Where am I financially? What is my financial status? What are my debts? What are my goals? What are my burdens? Where am I hoping to get to? And in the financial context specifically, helping people to hope for what might be possible, avoid pitfalls, get the knowledge that they need to optimize at certain points. So it's the financial journey. And then a layer above is their life journey, right? Whether they're a student entering their career, mid-career, planning for retirement, dealing with a financial crisis, those sorts of things. And so when you look at evolving from user centricity to sort of human centricity in terms of human outcomes and impact, you can start to guide clients to be proactive in how they align with those journeys to provide value along the way. And proving it out where this is going to, connecting the dots between leading and lagging indicators. For example, how trust is going to turn into retention and how goodwill is going to turn into brand advocacy, right? So we can make these from research to hypothesis to testing to forming the business case, including ROI, and presenting those ideas to the client. So sometimes the client will come with the knowledge that what's good for people is good for business, and we want to pursue avenues to move into adjacent markets or expand our service offering to improve these experiences. Other times, teams can sort of do their due diligence sort of behind the scenes or side of the desk to promote these ideas and incorporate them into their work as they move forward.
And do you always use the same layers for each project? Like the live layer and like, what you mentioned about the different financial situations from the user. Are those always like the same layers or like how does the layer system works? I'm super curious.
Yeah, so I'm a framework junkie. I love frameworks,
Me
and I
too.
will look to learn about all the frameworks and apply the frameworks in my work. I like to develop my own frameworks. But if you think about people at the center, and then you think about it from a systems perspective, right? You have the person, you have their friends and family, you have their employer or their educational institution, you have their community, you have society at large. I also like to look at the systems put forward in the book Donut Economics, where it's like we want human vibrancy, but without overshooting the natural limits of our planet, right? So looking at those things, but then also looking at the elements of the journey and sort of like tearing it out. So it's it's not always the same, but it's really taking a systems level view at a person, their goals, their needs, and how they're living their lives. That framework does also apply in health, right? If you think about, I worked for 1 year at United Healthcare, leading their design practice as chief design officer. And so I know that this applies also to health, where a health insurer is helping people hopefully to understand their coverage, to find a doctor, et cetera. And that's the sort of transactional layer where we want to empower self-service. But then again, it's the health journey. Am I concerned about symptoms? Do I have a recent diagnosis? Am I trying to figure out if this treatment is working? Am I taking care of a loved one? And then the life journey. Again, am I planning a family? Um, am I am I recovering from a crisis or some grief or a mental health challenge, in my life? And so it can help you think about things along those lines and have more context around what's driving the experience in the first place.
Yeah. I think super fascinating. I have never really thought about those different layers. So I think this was super interesting for me. I will definitely maybe do a little deep dive on it and learn more about it. I think this is really fascinating. Could you share a little bit about the process when you work with clients on really like defining not only the layers, but like the strategic needs, the user needs? What are some of the biggest challenges when it comes to these strategic decisions?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So you have me thinking for sure. So the hurdles, again, you'll hear me talk a lot about systems, especially in the United States. I'll sort of zoom into health, right? So we have a for-profit health system, though with Medicare and Medicaid, some of it is subsidized by the government. But if you look at the for-profit health institutions, they have the opportunity to help people along their path of health, to achieve better outcomes, to get healthier, to get a diagnosis, to seek a cure, to seek a treatment. In some aspects, there are uh, perverse incentives where the incentives are not aligned between what a person wants and what an organization wants, where the organization might profit the sicker people are as opposed to profiting the more healthy people are. And there are those situations, and I'm not naive to them. However, there are also situations where if we understand what people want most and we figure out how to help them get there, um, that is going to create a win-win situation. However, we also have to do it within the constraints of the system and the way it operates. For example, there may be a situation where a health organization is not able to stay in business if if they're paid primarily by insurance because insurance might not reimburse enough for them to provide the value that they could provide and actually save lives. And so, what are the different financial models that can be explored? Now, you could say, well, it should be reimbursable by insurance and, that should all work out. But the business dynamics at play would drive that company out of business, thereby not being able to provide the value to improving human health and lives. And so all of these things have to be weighted and balanced and hopefully, like I said, find that overlap in those win-win situations. So this involves analyzing everything about their business, the business model, where they're most profitable, how can they optimize cost, how do they look after the health and well-being of their internal constituencies, doctors, nurses, to make sure they're not burnt out and burdened. And how do we leverage AI to do that so that we're giving humans superpowers so that they have more time to do that, to do what humans are best at, right? Which is the empathy and being there for one another. Yeah.
I think 100% that makes so much sense. So there are a lot of designers listening, and some are working in strategic roles, but most of them, heard about strategy, but maybe want to dive a little bit deeper into like strategy or like the strategy part in their design team. So when you come across those design challenges that you just mentioned, what are some of the tools that you use to maybe get a little bit more into the strategic mindset and do it the right way, even if you are a designer? Designers can be strategic, but most of the times you don't do a lot of strategic decisions. So what are tips from you?
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned I'm 25 years into my career, and I would say to designers just starting out or mid-career, the world is your oyster, first of all. Second of all, we are so well needed because the way that I view it is that we're advocating for people that might not be advocated for. If you're working within a business, sometimes the business can lose sight of how people are thinking about the business, what they're wanting from the business, the harm the business might be doing. And yes, there's NPS. Yes, there's verbatims. Yes, people call the call center, but it's really hard for businesses to synthesize all of that information and develop a point of view on what is the biggest pain point. Where should we focus? So I view people who are taking a human-centered lens, designers, user experience people, we are advocates for the human beings who are affected by this business. Okay. And so we can bring that empathy, that superpower and infuse it into the organizations we work with, business, nonprofit, government. We are so well needed, and let's not ever forget that. And so in any situation, whether it's small or large, we can bring that advocacy, but not with an idealism where our consideration of the business is completely absent. in order for this business to have an impact, it has to stay in business. And so to understand the measures that matter most to the business, to understand how the business works, its financial cycle, how decisions are made, who are the people in a position of influence and power, making friends with those people, giving them PowerPoints for goodness sake, so that they can tell good stories and make good things happen. So being really business aware, business savvy. I think as designers, we can be idealists and be sort of like, anti-capitalism, and I totally get it, but let's work within the systems that exist, okay, to make the good things happen. I would love to sometimes, blow it all up and start all over again, but the reality is that we need to do the best we can with what we have in the moments we're in. And so in terms of tool set, I would say, like, let's eradicate imposter syndrome. Okay, let's harness our beliefs and our intellect, and let's show up with the intelligence and savviness that we have. We use craft, but we're not only craft. Okay, we're more than craft. And so that would be the advice I give. Use any tool at your disposal to connect the dots between what is going to be good for people and what is going to be good for business.
Sometimes it's, I would say, like like two different directions. Sometimes the things that are actually good for the people is not what's really good for the business, for
Mm-hmm.
example.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you find that balance? Because I think this is a really big challenge, with all the dark patterns out there and all the like sneaky business tricks of like tricking users and things that's actually not good for them. Thinking about social media, for example, or AI, a lot of shady things happened there. The people basically were tricked into agreeing that their data is used for the training. And all these things, good for business, amazing for business, top,
Mm-hmm.
very needed for business, but for
Mm-hmm.
the user, not so much. So how do you find the balance and advocate for the right thing, which is, I mean, we are designers, so definitely we're standing with the user, but how do you find a good balance that's ethically?
Yeah, this is where ethics come into play, right? And philosophers have explored these topics for generations, and there are different schools of thought. I mean, just even exploring, does the end justify the means? You could um, talk for years about that. So I think every individual needs to know what matters most to them and what are their must-haves and their absolutely nots with regard to the organizations that they dedicate their time, their passion to. Uh, on the one hand, you can say, the woman at McDonald's who got apple slices put into the Happy Meal may have done more to affect, the nutrition of children than, any other sort of particular intervention. So on the one hand, she's working for this fast food company, processed food, not great, but she's making an impact. On the other hand, you could look at somebody who is founding a startup that is dedicated to improving the nutrition of children, or working in government to make sure that people understand nutrition from a public health perspective. So all of these people have the same goal, which is improving human nutrition, but they all might have a different makeup internally in terms of what battles they're willing to fight, what teams they want to work with. Look, any human organization is going to have problems. So you kind of need to pick which flavor of crazy you want to sort of engage with, but also know like where your line is. For example, some systems, people might realize that some systems it's really hard to change. I realized that in my work at United Healthcare, it was too difficult for me to sort of drive the change that I wanted to drive. And so I opted out of that. And I decided the biggest impact that I could have as a person would be to work across organizations to start to infuse this sort of thinking and empower and inspire their teams to do more and do better.
and become an entrepreneur eventually, right? Like build your own business.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was an entrepreneur for 20 years and then in the corporate environment for a year and then back to entrepreneurship. So I think that is my preferred, method.
Um, because you think that you can make a better impact or a bigger impact.
So for me, yes, definitely. I think that for me, I like to understand the systems and then figure out how to break the rules.
Mhm.
But a lot of organizations are run in a more sort of rigid way where the system is sort of calcified. I struggle with that. So I more align with individuals and teams that are really looking for new ways,
Yeah,
really looking for what is that vision for the future that we want to run towards. So I can feel very stuck if I'm within an organization or a team that isn't interested in that.
can relate.
Yeah.
No, I can 100% relate. That can be very frustrating, and I assume that a lot of listeners can also relate because that can be very frustrating, especially if you have this like, innovative mindset, if you like to explore the future, if you think about like good solutions. So it sometimes can be a bit tricky. What advice would you give people generally who might, be in a similar situation as you were back then, and are interested in like entrepreneurship? I mean, this is basically switching the topic a little bit, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on that, like entrepreneurship, especially for designers. How do you see that? What potential do you see there?
There's there's a lot of potential. Right now with the organization I founded a couple of years ago, Beneficent, we're working with a team of consultants who are all independent and
Hmm.
piecing together teams depending on the client need. And I'm also working across a network of small agencies too, to band together to get amazing work done. There are amazing independent consultants out there right now, and there's sort of power in that network, and people can learn from each other and stick together and refer each other business. So I think through sort of testing it out, maybe moonlighting a little bit, testing the market, talking to folks, networking, seeing how you would position your services. Uh, it's definitely, it takes a lot of work to work on your brand, your value proposition, how you're going to approach marketing and lead generation and business development. It's always sort of 25% of an entrepreneur's job to do that while also making money. So you kind of need to be comfortable with the volatility and risk associated with, okay, when this project's done, I don't know where the next one is coming from, but sort of be confident that I'm going to take the right steps that I know work that are going to deliver me that project. And of course, setting aside money for taxes, setting aside money to pay yourself when you're on vacation. I mean, all of these things are super important considerations before sort of venturing out on your own. And I know a lot of people that they will collect the paycheck at their day jobs. Maybe it doesn't nourish their soul. Maybe it isn't where they find their purpose. They do that through their hobbies and through the nonprofits they're involved with. And that's totally fine too, right? It's sort of whatever works best so that you're getting that nourishment, but also able to take care of your family.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's super important that you really find that balance, but you need to have a creative outlet. That can be anything, what you mentioned could be your hobbies, could be your job, but I think like you need that to keep or to still keep being inspired and also bringing value to the table. And I mean, I can totally relate to everything you just mentioned. I'm a design entrepreneur myself for many years, so I know about the struggles, but I also know about the opportunities. And I feel like also when I'm getting into or getting acquired or hired for a project, then you have like definitely a bigger impact because you are the consultant, so people are listening to you. You also need to deliver
Yeah.
something. That's definitely a huge difference to being part of a team where you're just like you're part of this team, so you are secure and everything's nice. but you're
Yeah.
just part of this team, and that's it pretty much.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you're so right. I loved my team at all the organizations I've worked at. I miss them. I loved that sense of community. Working independently, it can be a little isolating. So I need to make sure that I'm meeting with people and having lunch and setting up those phone calls to get that collaborative dynamic. But you're right about the opportunity. Like when I give a client advice and they're like, "Oh my gosh, thank you. This is amazing. This and that." Um, I mean, I'm on top of the world, right? And also the autonomy. I think it was last week in December, the last week of December, I was like, you know what? I want to go to the Consumer Electronics Conference. I'm going to go. I didn't have to ask anybody. I just decided. And I went and it was amazing. And I met people and I picked up a new client and I was able to write about it. And I had inspiration and fuel that's now helping me add more value to my client engagements. And so it can be really fun.
Yeah, no, I think that's also like a great example of like going to conferences. You don't need to ask anyone, you just go, you explore, and you always get something out of it. Also curious to hear your thoughts on now we're living in a very interesting time right now. Generative AI is basically changing the way we work and we do things, and like metaverse and like so many things are going on right now. So, how do you think all these tools are changing, especially design entrepreneurship?
It's such a good question and one I've been thinking deeply about. And so I made it through the dot-com bubble and then mobile, and now we're here looking at how to leverage and incorporate AI into our work, but also to design it and how to help organizations apply it to improve their internal workflows and the customer experiences they're delivering to the people they serve. From a consulting perspective, I mean, again, when I was at CES, I had the epiphany. I'm like, oh my goodness, with agentic AI, um, agents could found a company and the company can be employed by agents and super agents to the point where there could be an AI consultancy. Come to find out that already exists. And instead of it being an exclusively AI consultancy, what it is a platform of agents and super agents that innovators and designers can leverage to do more in their work. And so these things are happening. We're going to see it more and more, kind of platforms that go beyond what software used to do to link together, multiple points in the process. And I know you teach about this and train about this. I think it's going to disrupt consulting in a major way. I think the more that consultants can leverage and align with these tools and to bring greater value to their clients, the better we're going to be. I think we're going to be able to do a lot more with a lot less, and hopefully that whole experience will be valuable. But I mean, even if you had all the answers for a business in a report, say AI could like develop a report, it has all the answers, like bing, bang, boom. It's not that easy to take the gems of insight and wisdom in a report, whether they were generated by people or generated by AI, and all of a sudden transform a business, right? That's human work. And so people are needed to guide organizations through this tumultuous period of disruption.
So, I mean, you kind of already answered my next question already, but I'm also curious to hear how you think like the future of like strategic design and UX will look like. I mean, of course, not everything will be automated, but how is everything that's happening right now affecting your business? Like the things that you bring to the table, that we all as designers bring to the table. What's your take on the future?
I'm balancing a healthy fear and skepticism with excitement and optimism. Um, you know, Humanity has faced many struggles. Um, Many disastrous things have happened, many wonderful things have happened. My primary concern is the pace of change because, as I mentioned, in the sort of transformation and change management of applying AI in large organizations, that's a process, right? If AI starts to do people's jobs for them, how can humans keep up? How can we apply this as fast as it's sort of advancing? Also, in terms of if AI at scale is doing harm, it's going to do so rapidly and it's going to have huge impacts at scale rapidly. So it's like speed to harm. On the other side, if it changes people's lives, it's that speed to value, speed to outcomes. And so that concerns me that we're doing large scale human experiments right now. I mean, social media in and of itself, wherever you fall on the opinion of did it ruin, the generation, the Gen Z generation? Do they not know how to communicate? Or is it the typical like older people wondering what the heck is wrong with the younger generation? Like, did we allow companies to experiment on our youth? What kind of experiments are we allowing on humanity right now? The whole quote from Jurassic Park, where Jeff Goldblum says, they were so preoccupied with whether they could do it, being the scientists, they didn't stop to think whether they should do it. I think regulation and even just awareness of unintended consequences, like things are happening and we don't know where we're going to end up. I'll use health as an example. I think when you apply conversational AI to health, you're going to have all of the knowledge that humanity has on health in the palm of somebody's hand. Now, will there be access to that so that people can get better information at the right time? Or will that be concealed from them, managed by corporations? Will it actually be used to drive down the cost of health so we can have lower cost but better outcomes? Will we figure out how to weave humans into the scenario? All of these questions remain and need to be explored. That's why I actually founded a conference called Design for Dignity last year with my colleague Chris McCarthy to explore the application of ethics to AI, but specifically the intersection between health and social impact. So health, not as an industry per se, but also as the means by which we improve our own human vibrancy and the health of our communities and society.
So important. Also, like designing for dignity. Maybe we can dive a little bit deeper into that topic. I'm super curious to understand this a little bit better of how this actually works. Does there a framework consist, a system, or how do you approach design for dignity?
Yeah, so the incorporation of ethics into the design process is essential, and many great folks are exploring that, have written about that, have spoken about that. So aligning an organization's brand promise and core values with a sort of declaration of ethics that can be used to guide the decision-making process and as prompts for ideation is important. I actually co-created a canvas, a Design for Dignity canvas, that is a workshopping technique that teams can use to consider what is the social contract that we have with the people we serve? What are they expecting from us? And when do we actually harm them? Or where can we actually partner with them? What are the moments of dignity that we can help to empower or amplify? And what are the moments of indignity that we can seek to avoid and that we can monitor, that we can measure? Because whatever's measured gets focused upon and improved. So measuring the right things is of extreme importance.
Yeah. Where can people learn more about this and everything that you created there? Is there something online, or what would you recommend?
Sure, sure. There's a Design for Dignity group on LinkedIn, and there's designfordignity.com, where we're posting information about the upcoming event June 3rd and 4th in Atlanta, Georgia at Emory University. So people can look there. They can also contact me for the Design for Dignity canvas. It's on Miro and is accessible to everyone. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Perfect. I will link everything in the show notes so people can check it out, have a look at it. Are there any other resource that you would recommend designers to have a look at? Maybe about strategic design, ethical design, something like this.
It's a good question. I recommend donut economics for sure, and that designers consider that they are business people. They are program managers, they can be product managers, thinking about design and human centricity as a lens that can be applied to roles and positions inside organizations that, make an impact. So that's why I recommend that sort of more, economics focused book. But also for folks to sort of, if not get sort of a mini MBA or crash course to just really get familiar on the inner workings of what makes their organization tick so that they can be sure to apply their superpowers in the direction of adding value. I'm fascinated by synthetic personas, and concerned with them because where's the data coming from and how do we make sure it's real? How do we not leave humans out of the process, but also how do we leverage them, right? So I think that if we do it right, synthetic personas may be able to, in real time, give businesses insight and feedback that is easier to sort of implement into their business process or scale. And so I'm just really considering that more and would encourage folks to approach it with an open mind so that we can shape it. I mean, somebody said to me recently, I want to happen to AI. I don't want AI to happen to me. And so I think, to have that mindset's really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love that phrase. Like, I want AI to happen and not happen to me. I got it
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I need to remember that. And there's also, I'm fascinated by synthetic personas as well. I think very interesting. The only thing, like from a design perspective, where I think like we need to be super aware of is that this can't be the only research input. We still need to, this is basically like an assumption, pretty much.
Right.
So you start with assumptions and then you need to validate them. And I think like people need to get it right. And I feel especially non-designers sometimes rely too much on synthetic personas, for example.
The quick
So,
answers. Yeah.
yeah, the quick answer. So this is definitely a big challenge, but also something that we need to educate. We need to help people to understand how to use them. First, we need to learn this our own. We need to make our own experiences, try those tools out, and see what actually works and what doesn't, and be also critical but curious and see how we can leverage that. I think that's the perfect mindset right now. So
Yeah.
thank you
And I
so
think it
much.
could be an amazing tool for scanning the internet for social sentiment to bring that into the persona. So, for example, I worked with a health insurance company once. There were death threats on their app. And I mean, this was 10 years ago, but then seeing what happened, with the assassination of the CEO of United Healthcare, I think when we go so deep in talking with folks about the specific subject matter, I think we can lose the forest through the trees around the frequency and severity of human impact of an organization. And so I think I hypothesize that AI might be able to help us synthesize broader data sets and sort of bring them into the fold.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, this is such a good point. Because this is still very difficult if you do like qualitative user research interviews. You
Yeah.
don't have the variety of people, but there are so many more parameters or data points that you actually need to pick up.
Yeah.
That's very difficult, especially for health organizations who have like millions of patients, right? So like
Yeah.
millions of people, and they all have their own problems. Of course, you can like group them somehow, but still, there are certain things that you miss. I think this is such a good point. Also to incorporate AI because it's a big challenge. I'm seeing that on the LinkedIn basically every day. I also shared some stuff on it, and it was very controversial of like how to use AI for user research and synthetic personas and everything. But this is exactly the approach, thinking about where does it really make sense and where are we not really like getting the most out of the research method that we are currently using. And
Hmm.
it's not that every research that we are doing or the methods are perfect.
Hmm.
Most or sometimes we don't get things right. This is, I think, like such a good example um, with the help organizations because there's so many data points. How should
Yeah.
we, how should we analyze that?
Right.
Um, yeah, super, super interesting. So, where can people find you online, Amy, if they would like to maybe ask you a question or yeah, dive a little bit deeper into conversations with you? What is the best way to reach you and maybe continue this conversation?
Yeah, definitely on LinkedIn. I'm Amy Heymans, and I welcome conversations with people. I'm constantly giving people career direction or mentorship when they need it, as they need it. And then from a business perspective, beneficent dot design. Beneficent is an English word. It means for the good of all, and it sort of encapsulates my personal mission.
Wonderful. Amy, thank you so much for being in the podcast. Super inspiring. Lots of insights, super interesting. All the project you work on, all the like the different thoughts you had about the future. Absolutely fascinating. I'm going to link all resources in the show notes so people can check it out, connect with you on LinkedIn, see what you share there, and continue learning from you. So thank you so much, Amy.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Patricia, and keep up the good work. You're doing amazing stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye bye.